Okay, so picture this. You're at your daughter's graduation party. It's a day filled with, joy and pride, excitement for the future. But then the unthinkable happens. She vanishes without a trace, along with two of her closest friends.
Wow.
It's a true story. It gripped Springfield, Missouri back in 1992. And it's a story that we're diving into today, Springfield 3.
It's a case that has baffled investigators, and captivated the public for, gosh, decades now, right? Three young women, Susie Streeter, Stacy McCall, and Janelle Kirby, just seemingly vanished into thin air. They left behind a trail of unanswered questions and just shattered hopes, really.
It all began on a seemingly ordinary graduation weekend, right? Like nothing out of the ordinary. Susie, who was a bit of a rebel, she kept the celebrations pretty low-key with her mom, Cheryl.
Right.
Stacy, on the other hand, she was the popular one. Found herself kind of surrounded by family, but was, longing for a break from all the festivities. And Janelle, who was always by Stacy's side, she was kind of navigating a house full of relatives. Each of them had their own unique personality and dynamics, which, as we'll see, kind of played a role in the events that unfolded.
Yeah, and it's particularly intriguing. You know how these seemingly ordinary lives just intersect with such extraordinary circumstances,
Right.
It really underscores the fact that these events could happen anywhere to anyone.
Yeah.
Shattering that illusion of safety that we often cling to.
Absolutely. Their weekend started, like any other.
Yeah.
Graduation parties, catching up with friends, making plans for the future. They even planned a trip to Whitewater Park in Branson.
Oh, yeah.
A typical summer adventure for, young friends.
Yeah. Yeah, that detail, the anticipation of that fun-filled trip,
Right.
It makes their sudden disappearance even more jarring. Like, it's this stark reminder that life can change in an instant, and sometimes those changes are irreversible.
Absolutely. And the girls' plan took a bit of an unexpected turn when Stacy got cold feet about the late-night drive to Branson. She was worried about upsetting her parents.
Right.
So they decided to stay at Janelle's house instead.
Yeah.
A seemingly small decision,
Yeah.
that would have significant consequences.
Yeah, this is a classic example, really, of how seemingly insignificant choices can have ripple effects,
Yeah.
altering the course of events in ways we can't predict. Like, had they gone to Branson, would they have encountered a different fate, It's a question that just haunts the case.
It really does. And upon arriving at Janelle's, they realized there wasn't enough space for all three of them. So Susie and Stacy headed back to Susie's mother's house, arriving around 2 a.m., likely the last time anyone saw them.
It's unsettling to think about that moment, knowing what we know now.
Yeah.
They were simply going home, unaware of the darkness that awaited them.
Exactly. And this is where the mystery deepens. Janelle woke up the next morning and she couldn't reach her friends.
Yeah.
So she drove to Susie's house. And what she found would soon send shockwaves through the community. Broken glass on the porch, a shattered porch light, and the front door unlocked all signs that something was amiss.
Yeah, these seemingly small details, they become significant clues in the investigation, right?
Right.
Was the broken porch light an accident?
Right.
A sign of a struggle? Or a deliberate act to stage a scene, you know? It's a question that has fueled speculation for years.
For sure. And despite the unsettling scene outside, the house itself was tidy, the beds were unmade, purses were left untouched, and there were no signs of a struggle. Janelle and her boyfriend, they even swept up the broken glass on the porch, a decision that would later be scrutinized as potentially destroying evidence.
Well, yeah, I mean, this highlights the challenge of those early investigations, especially in cases where the initial assumption is that nothing sinister has occurred, right? In hindsight, it's easy to see how crucial evidence might have been overlooked or unintentionally compromised.
Yeah, they were young, their friends were missing. I mean, they weren't thinking like forensic investigators.
Of course.
But as the day wore on, the alarm bells began to ring louder. Stacy's parents couldn't reach her, and a concerned neighbor reported seeing Stacy's car at Susie's house all day.
Right. The gradual realization that something was terribly wrong.
What?
Like that slow dawning of fear and uncertainty,
Yeah.
It's a chilling reminder that even in seemingly safe communities, the unthinkable can happen.
Absolutely. And as darkness fell on June 7th, 1992, the Springfield Police Department finally entered the picture, stepping into a mystery that had already been unfolding for hours.
The police were faced with, well, A perplexing situation, really. A
Right.
seemingly pristine crime scene, no witnesses, and three young women vanished without a trace.
Right.
Their initial working theory was that the women had left willingly, perhaps with someone they knew. This assumption, understandable given the lack of evidence of foul play, but it would really shape those early days of the investigation.
So instead of searching for potential victims, the police focused their efforts on finding clues about the women's uh, possible companions.
Exactly. They launched this massive effort, distributed thousands of missing person flyers, followed up on every lead, no matter how small. The case quickly gained national attention. The faces of the Springfield Three, they were appearing on milk cartons across the country, their names whispered in hushed tones, a collective gasp of fear and disbelief rippling through communities nationwide, really.
Yeah, that kind of media attention must have been a double-edged sword, right?
Oh, absolutely.
On one hand, it helps raise awareness, generate tips, but on the other hand, it can create a chaotic environment for investigators.
Precisely. The media frenzy, while well-intentioned, it created this whirlwind of information, much of it conflicting or irrelevant, making it even harder to separate genuine leads from speculation. And at the center of this storm was Police Chief Terry Knowles, a man whose handling of the case would become a subject of intense scrutiny.
From what I've read, Knowles seemed more interested in controlling the narrative than in following the evidence.
Yeah.
His micromanagement demanding officers get his approval before pursuing leads. I mean, it seems like it would have stifled their initiative.
It certainly raises questions about whether his approach hindered the investigation. Knowles' insistence on being the gatekeeper of information, coupled with his tendency to overshare with the media, it likely created more confusion than clarity.
He even allowed reporters to film people taking polygraph tests. I mean, that seems incredibly unwise in a serious investigation.
It's a highly unorthodox move. Polygraph tests, while often used in investigations, are not foolproof. They measure physiological responses to questions, like heart rate and perspiration, and are interpreted by an examiner to determine truthfulness. However, they can be influenced by stress, anxiety, and even skilled deception.
So releasing footage of those tests could have compromised their integrity.
Yeah.
It's like giving potential suspects a glimpse into the investigative process.
Exactly. It could have inadvertently provided those involved with a roadmap, potentially allowing them to tailor their responses and actions to evade detection.
While the police were trying to navigate this media frenzy, the public began to develop their own theories, fueled by rumors and speculation. One of the early leads focused on a suspicious van.
The van theory, as it became known, took on a life of its own, really. Witnesses described the van in various colors, with some even claiming to have seen Susie driving it.
It sounds like something straight out of a nightmare,
You know-
A mysterious van lurking in the shadows, a symbol of lurking danger.
Yeah, the van became a symbol of both hope and frustration. People desperately wanted to believe that it held the key to solving the case. But despite countless reported sightings and extensive efforts to track it down, the van remained elusive, a phantom haunting the edges of the investigation.
And eventually that lead went cold.
It did. The investigators had to shift their focus elsewhere. One of their first major leads involved Dustin Reckla, Susie's ex-boyfriend.
What made him a person of interest?
Reckla was connected to a group of teenagers known as a grave robbing gang. Their activities, as the name suggests, involved desecrating graves for valuables. It's a disturbing thought, and it immediately cast a shadow of suspicion over Reckla.
Especially considering Susie had recently broken up with him and was planning to testify against him.
Right.
That sounds like a pretty strong motive for wanting her silenced.
It certainly did. The potential motive seemed clear. Silence Susie before she could reveal information about his illicit activities. However, despite the lack of a solid alibi and the disturbing nature of his past activities, Reckla passed a polygraph test, as did every member of his gang.
Those results don't necessarily prove innocence, though, right? As you mentioned earlier, polygraphs aren't foolproof.
That's correct. There's always room for interpretation and the possibility of false negatives. However, in this case, the fact that everyone in the gang passed the test did cast doubt on their involvement.
So the investigation hit another dead end. Where did they turn next?
Their attention shifted to another individual close to the family, Bart Strader, Cheryl's son, and Susie's brother.
Family dynamics can certainly be complex, and I imagine the pressure of the investigation would only amplify those complexities.
Absolutely. Bart had a history of alcohol abuse and a strained relationship with his mother and sister. He lacked an alibi for the night of the disappearances, which put him squarely in the spotlight.
But, like Rekla, he passed a polygraph test.
He did. And without any concrete evidence linking him to the crime, the police were forced to move on. However, Bart's story takes a darker turn years later, revealing a side of him that raises questions about whether the police dismissed him too quickly back in '92.
What happened?
In 2019, Bart was arrested in Tennessee for attempting to lure a 15-year-old girl away from a nail salon. He was charged with public intoxication, disorderly conduct, and attempted false imprisonment.
Those are serious charges. It makes you wonder if there were warning signs they missed back in '92, signs of a potential for violence that went undetected.
It's a chilling thought, and it speaks to the challenge of assessing risk and predicting human behavior, really. Sometimes the most dangerous individuals hide in plain sight, their true nature concealed behind a veneer of normalcy.
And in this case, there was another individual lurking in the shadows, someone with a history of violence that should have raised immediate red flags. Robert Craig Cox, a convicted murderer who lived across the street from Cheryl and Susie.
Cox's story is a complex and disturbing one, and his connection to the Springfield Three is perhaps the most perplexing and frustrating aspect of the entire case.
It's almost unbelievable that someone with his history could end up living so close to the victims. How did that happen? And what role, if any, did he play in their disappearance? Robert Craig Cox, a convicted murderer living across the street. It sounds like something out of a true crime novel.
Right.
But this was the unsettling reality for the Springfield Three. His history alone is enough to raise some serious concerns.
Yeah, his story is really a chilling example of how individuals can just slip through the cracks of the justice system, leaving a trail of victims and unanswered questions in their wake. Cox's past is, well, it's riddled with disturbing incidents,
Right.
The most notable being the 1978 murder of Sharon Sellers at Disney World.
I remember reading about that case. Sharon was a young woman working in a gift shop. The details were horrific.
Yeah, the brutality of the crime it shocked the nation. Cox was seen with blood on his mouth and a chunk of his tongue bitten off, indicating a fierce struggle.
Wow.
Forensic evidence, footprints, blood, and hair samples seemed to overwhelmingly point to Cox as the perpetrator.
But wasn't his conviction overturned?
It was, and this is where the frustration lies,
Yeah.
Despite the seemingly strong evidence, the court deemed it insufficient.
Wow.
And Cox was released. It's a baffling turn of events that allowed him to walk free and tragically continue his path of destruction.
And that path led him to Springfield, right across the street from Cheryl and Susie. It's almost too much of a coincidence to believe.
It's a chilling reminder that the world can be a small and dangerous place.
Yeah.
And sometimes the most sinister threats, they reside closer than we think. The fact that the police initially overlooked Cox, it's a significant oversight, one that highlights the importance of thorough background checks and information sharing between law enforcement agencies.
It was actually Sharon Sellers' mother, Dorothy, who alerted the police to Cox's presence in Springfield. She had been tirelessly tracking his movements for years, determined to see justice for her daughter.
Dorothy's dedication is a testament to the unwavering love and determination of a mother seeking answers. Her vigilance may have been the key to cracking the Springfield Three case, but unfortunately, it wasn't enough to bring her daughter's killer to justice.
When the police finally questioned Cox, he had what seemed like a solid alibi, spending the night at his father's, attending church with his girlfriend the next morning.
Alibis can be powerful tools in criminal investigations,
Right.
They provide a framework for verifying an individual's whereabouts during a specific time period, and a strong alibi can effectively eliminate someone as a suspect.
But in Cox's case, his alibi crumbled rather quickly.
It did. After being initially ruled out as a suspect, Cox was arrested for robbery in Texas.
Oh, wow.
During his interrogation, he admitted that he had asked his girlfriend to lie for him, effectively blowing his alibi wide open.
So he was a liar and a convicted felon with no alibi for the night the Springfield Three disappeared. It seems like he should have been their prime suspect.
He certainly fit the profile. However, when questioned directly about the Springfield Three, Cox denied any involvement. But a few years later, in a chilling interview with a reporter, he made a series of cryptic statements that suggested he knew more than he was letting on.
What did he say?
His words were both vague and unsettling. He claimed to know that the women were dead and buried near Springfield, but refused to provide specifics, saying he didn't want to incriminate himself. This raised a question that continues to haunt the case. Was Cox genuinely confessing? Or was he a narcissistic manipulator toying with the family's emotions and enjoying the attention?
It's a cruel mind game either way.
Yeah.
And while Cox has remained a prime suspect ever since, his cryptic statements have never led to any concrete evidence.
Yeah. The lack of tangible proof has created, well, a frustrating impasse. Cox is currently in prison for other crimes, seemingly content to hold whatever knowledge he may have close to the vest, leaving the families and investigators in a perpetual state of limbo.
There was also that psychic's tip, right? About the women being buried near Cox South Hospital.
Yes, that was another layer added to this already complex and confusing case. The tip, coupled with ground-penetrating radar results that indicated potential burial sites beneath the hospital's parking garage, sparked a glimmer of hope.
Wow.
The fact that the parking garage had been built a year after the disappearances, it added an eerie coincidence to the mix.
But the police chose not to excavate the area.
They did not. They cited concerns about the cost of excavation and the belief that construction crews would have discovered any bodies during the building process. However, this decision has been met with criticism and skepticism from many who believe it was a missed opportunity to potentially uncover the truth.
It's understandable why people would be frustrated. It feels like a chance to finally get some answers, even if those answers are painful, was missed.
Yeah, the decision not to excavate underscores those difficult choices law enforcement officials often face in these types of cases.
Right.
Balancing limited resources with the need for thorough investigation, it's a delicate act. And in this instance, the perceived low probability of finding anything concrete, well, it led to inaction.
So the mystery endures. It's been over 3 decades since Susie Streeter, Stacy McCall, and Cheryl Levitt vanished without a trace. Their families are left with unanswered questions, their community forever marked by the shadow of this unsolved case.
The Springfield 3 case serves as this haunting reminder,
Yeah.
of the fragility of life, the enduring power of hope, and the frustrating limitations of even the most dedicated investigations. It's a story that continues to captivate and confound, its unanswered questions echoing through the years. A testament to the enduring human need for closure and the haunting reality that some mysteries may never be fully solved.
It's a heart-wrenching story that leaves us with more questions than answers. Did these 3 young women simply vanish into thin air? Or did someone, perhaps someone lurking in the shadows with a sinister past, orchestrate their disappearance? Was it a random act of violence? A carefully planned abduction? Or something else entirely? We may never know for sure, but one thing is certain, the mystery of the Springfield 3 will continue to fascinate and haunt us. A chilling reminder that even in seemingly ordinary lives, darkness can lurk around any corner. Well, that's it for our deep dive today. Make sure to subscribe to the show to catch our next episode where we'll be exploring another fascinating true crime mystery. Until then, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.
And remember, the truth is out there, somewhere.